Everyone, my name is Ruby Powers with Powers Law Group, and today we're going to talk about the marriage-based green card, common questions, timelines, and do's and don'ts. What's really interesting is that not only am I an immigration attorney, but I actually went through this process about 22 years ago, 22 years ago. And back then it took a few years. So I can tell you from experience, having gone through it, that I know it can be nerve-wracking and there's lots of different questions that you have about it. So anyway, I'm board certified. My firm's 15 years old and I've been practicing 16 years. So what should couples aim to do in an interview? Well, this is also just general information. It doesn't take the place of immigration advice, and we just want to be a resource for you. So, well, obviously you should show up on time. I mean, I usually tell my clients to make sure that they know where their passports are the night before, their documents, go through the pile of, what you've given before, but then the originals, get what you haven't given and what you want to show them, and have everything ready. You want to sort of scope out how long it takes to get to the location and make sure that you get there with enough time to just breathe and calm down, because I know that even though when it is a true and even a long relationship or marriage, you can be nervous because it's a scary process. So dress respectfully. You're sort of, it's not a court, but it is respectful to look good. And like no flip-flops and ripped clothes and stuff. Be yourself, take breaths. They're watching your body language, how you interact with your spouse, how you communicate. Do you sit next to each other? Do you like each other? Things like that. So generally bring a copy of new documents and some originals of what you've shown before. Organize your paperwork. Be respectful to the officer. Some officers are super chatty, and some of them are just super contrite and to the point. So I usually say just mimic that situation. So if you're having a good conversation, go ahead. And if they're just answering the question and want you to answer and move on, then just do that. You might want to note the officer's name, and so that if you ever have to deal with anything later on, hopefully not, you can be able to refer to that, and be prepared to wait, because you have to wait for an appointment to be called in. Sometimes just like going to a doctor or lawyer's office, there could be a little bit of delays. So what not to do in the interview? Well, don't be disrespectful talking on the phone, hanging up the phone call. You might not want to be, too loud in the waiting room. Don't answer questions without understanding them. If you don't understand the officer's accent or question, make sure to ask, could you explain that? Or can you say that a different way? Or I don't understand. Sometimes when people are really nervous, they'll just start answering what they think they heard, and then that could cause a whole bunch of more problems. Don't expect the officer to know everything from your file. They might have just gotten it and started reviewing it that morning. So you can, if it seems like they're missing something in their logic, maybe you need to explain. But that's also why being prepped by an attorney, immigration attorney beforehand, and or having your attorney go with you can be very helpful. Don't answer questions that are not addressed to you. For example, if they specifically ask your spouse something, well, they're asking them on a reason to have them answer it. So those are some things to consider. And don't be afraid to explain if you can't remember, and you could say, I don't know. And make sure not to lose your temper. And I think it's also important to know, especially if you're using a translator, like body language can be really loud as well. So keep an eye on that. Now, things that USCIS is looking at. So they sort of have this like rubric, this like checklist of things. Or like, is there a huge age gap between spouses? Because their idea is like, if there's a huge age gap, then what can they really have in common? Well, we know that people can have a real relationship even with a huge age gap. But then they'll also be a little suspicious if it's been a short marriage. Now, again, hey, some people have been together a long time before they get married. I think they're more suspicious of met on a Tuesday, you got married on a Thursday, and then you're filing on a Friday or something. Like that's going to definitely raise some red flags. Different cultural backgrounds, like if you have completely what we generally would be considered different cultural backgrounds, they'd be like, that's interesting. especially if there's an age gap and the cultural and religious, so there's sort of like all these different areas. And if the more differences, then they're like, is this really a real relationship? Um, if people have different addresses when they come in, so they might ask you to pull out your driver's license, say, okay, show me your address, show me your address. Now, some people didn't have the work authorization, they couldn't get the driver's license. So there's reasons for some of that. And you don't want to make sure you don't arrive late, lose your appointment because it can be really hard to get it rescheduled. And maybe they'll just deny you if you don't communicate that you're running late. Not having all the documents, because then they can ask you for a request for evidence, and if you give incorrect information on your application. Now, questions can include your relationship history. How did you meet? Who proposed first? Um, what was your first date? Have you met their parents? Have you met their parents? Do you know their siblings? What are their names? Date things from about your wedding. Who organized it? Where was it? Who was there? Who wasn't there? Your daily routines. Who wakes up when? What side of the bed do you live on? Do you live on? Do you sleep on? Um, and a lot more of those types of things. Sometimes there's this officer apparently who'll get them say, okay, everybody get your keys out. Okay. And it's like, okay, which key is for your house or your apartment or where you live? And that's like telling to see, well, you live at the same place. Talk about your kids, stepkids. You should pretty much know your stepkids' date of birth, their full names, and things like that. Personal habits, needs. So they've even asked, like, how much does your spouse make? How much is the rent? They really want to know how you're, running your lives. Big events, usually like, what'd you give each other on your birthday type of thing. And if you don't remember, it's better to say, I don't remember. I will tell you, even for people who've been married a really long time, they can still mess up these questions. So, but if they see that you're generally getting it and everything matches up, then they will stop asking you. So make sure that you refresh your memory, that you look through the applications and everything. I mean, generally they're trying to make sure that the person that it was a real relationship, you're legally able to be married to each other, you're not still married to somebody else, and that it's about a bona fide relationship. And so generally the things they look to the most are taxes, apartment or home ownership with leases with the names on it, and then bank statements. Those are the three they love, love, love the most. So if you don't have some of those, then you got to make up for it. Photos, anybody can have photos. And the funny thing is most people don't print photos anymore, but we have to make people print them just to submit this to show them. And we usually say, don't take that many, just send some, or you can bring a photo album on the day of. Um, so be ready, collect your documents, review the applications, prepare new documents that haven't been submitted yet, and stay organized. Some of the important documents: birth certificate, marriage certificate, there's a death certificate or a divorce before, proof of the citizenship or green card status of the petitioner, proof of lawful entry. If there's any criminal matters, bring that. Prior marriage termination documents, make sure they're signed by the judge, and have the original. Court, police, prison records, if there's any of that. Military, potentially, especially if the person worked abroad with the military, and medical examination should have already been submitted, or if it wasn't, bring it sealed and recent to the interview. Now, of course, timelines can differ, okay? So, but what we're seeing in the Houston area right now around June 2024 is that some people are getting approved or interviews within about 6 months. And there are some holdovers from like the last couple years. Right now, people who hadn't submitted medical exams because they were taking so long, we didn't submit them, are getting requests for evidence for those, and soon after we're starting to see the approval. The reason why the green card holder can take a little bit longer is because the visa wait is not current at the moment, but it's something you have to look at the visa bulletin for USCIS and see if it's current on the F2A category or not. Okay, so this can differ, so let's don't consider this the gospel, but what we should look at is USCIS.gov's processing times, as well as, ask the attorney, how long is it taking? Now, there's this thing called the Stokes interview. Hopefully you don't have it. It's usually if there was any red flags, or you got married when you were in immigration court, or there's something in that the fraud department has flagged you that they think something suspicious. So there's a lot of list of questions. Here at Powers Law Group, we have a list of questions that we would put a couple through, if we thought they might have the Stokes interview. But generally what happens is you're separated, and they ask the same questions, but not either in the same room. Or what they'll do is they'll put one person aside, and they'll ask the first person, and then they'll bring the second person in, and then they'll ask the questions. And that's even sort of worse for the first person, because you're like, oh, are they going to say the same thing or not? Anyway, this doesn't happen very often. But if you have some things in your past that makes them want to do this, you want to be prepared. So generally, you could be approved for the 2 and the 10-year, 2-year if your marriage is less than 2 years at the time of adjudication, 10-year otherwise. There could be a request for evidence for more information, additional review by an officer. They could ask for a second interview. That's not so common. Or there could be a denial. Denials are sort of hard to get, but it could happen if you just either have an ineligibility, to need a waiver, not eligible for waiver. Also could be if there's you had some prior stuff that they didn't like. But that's something that's important to come to an immigration attorney or have an immigration attorney if you have anything that's more of like a red flag. So dress professionally, be honest and open, speak your mind, but be cognizant of saving time, and go ahead and have a practice. Here at Powers Law Group, we do a prep with clients that want before they go to the interview, and hopefully this was also very helpful as well. So you can reach us so many different ways: TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook. You can also be on our newsletter in English and Spanish, and we want to be a resource for you. So you can reach us at 713-589-2085. We're glad you joined us for our webinar today, and we have all these other ones, and in English and Spanish. So if this was helpful, please subscribe, like, follow, all that good stuff. Tell other people about us. Write a good review if you want to. We'd appreciate it. But we want to be there for you. So feel free to share this with someone who think that they could benefit. And like I said, I actually went through this process 20-something years ago. And so I know, even as a citizen, I was stressed out, even though it was a real relationship and we're still married. So to this day, and 2 kids and all that good stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to give this information to you because this is a hot topic, and good luck, and feel free to reach out to us. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.